All right, y'all. We are here again, back for episode 7 of the Throwback here on Inside Carolina. And I am tickled to death. One, because I have two much more experienced and better looking gentlemen than I with me today. This is the first time we've done one of these with a video function, and my mom always said I had a face for radio. So this is going to be a little bit of the first voyage of the ship tonight, video wise. But we are here once again. You know how the throwback works, guys. We have basically set up a night for you to just revel in nostalgia, right? Night, day, morning, whenever you're listening to this, we want you to feel nostalgia. And we hope that today's episode and today's game will help you guys with that. We're going to talk about the 2004 football game at Kenan Stadium with the NC State Wolfpack. And as you guys are listening today, I know you're as excited as I am. This is a big deal. This is a huge, controversial game. This game still sticks in the craw of many of our friends from West Raleigh. And if you're as excited to listen to the show as we are to put it together, I would ask you to stop what you're doing right now. Go rate and review the show wherever you're getting this podcast. If it's on iTunes or Google Play or whatever, make sure you take a chance. Go say what you think about us. If it's positive, give us a 5-star review. If it's not positive, let us know. We want to do better. We want to make sure we're giving you guys really good content. We want to make sure we're giving you guys what you want to hear and that you're entertained by what we're putting out there. While we're there, I want to make sure I give a shout out to Johnny T-Shirt, our friends on Franklin Street. They've been around forever. Right now, you're taking care of us. Johnny T-Shirt's taking care of us. Let's make sure we're taking care of them. Hit up johnnytshirt.com. They always have stuff on sale. Get your gear, whether you like, Columbia, Nike, Jumpman, whatever. Johnny T-Shirt's got it. Hit them up, johnnytshirt.com. They're quick on the delivery button, too. So if you want to get stuff here in a couple of days, they'll get it to you in a couple of days. But take care of them. We want to take care of local businesses, especially folks like Johnny T-Shirt who have been with us since the jump here on InsideCarolina.com. I'm going to set up this game really quickly, and then I want to bring in our guests because, again, they've done this so much more than I have, and I'm really thrilled that they're both here today. This game, why this game? Well, like I said, it's one of the biggest, probably controversial results in the history of Carolina football, but definitely in the history of this rivalry. And I'm not trying to be over hyperbolic here, but that's really, I think when we start talking about it, you'll recognize that's what this game was. The result still sticks in the craw of folks that we've seen. You talk to a State fan right now and bring up this game, and they're going to be madder than a pack of dogs on a 3-legged cat. So make sure you're really locked in to hear what our two panelists say today about this game. This game was only on WTVD at the time. Thankfully, we had a great radio crew who were working with WTVD to bring this game to us locally in the Triangle Market. Right now, Carolina was playing NC State as the play-by-play guy. Actually, no, I'm sorry, the color guy on the Tar Heel Radio Network at the time called this 94th meeting the Bloodletting. It was held on October 9th of 2004. Carolina was coming in at 2-3. They had wins over William & Mary and Georgia Tech, but huge losses at Virginia, Louisville, and Florida State, who were all ranked. They were playing with a senior quarterback, Darian Durant. So Carolina fans rightfully had hope because they had a good guy, good gunslinger, guy dropped back in the pocket there. They played 6 ranked opponents that season, so they were used to seeing big names, big, powerful competition. NC State was coming in 3-1. Their only loss was at home against Ohio State, but they did close this season losing 5 of their last 7, including this game. They didn't make a bowl. Chuck Amato is their coach. I'll leave that blank for you guys to figure out about what we think about Chuck Amato. But with that should give you guys a little bit of context of where we are. And I want to bring in our two panelists today. First, friend of mine from way back, former Carolina football player. He is the lead college football analyst for Stadium Sports at watchstadium.com. This guy's also an amazing cook. If you follow him on social media, he will absolutely get your mouth watering and have your palate ready to go with some of the stuff that he posts on Instagram and Twitter. Mr. Michael Felder. Felder, how you doing, buddy?
Joey, I'm doing great, man. I haven't been posting as much to Instagram because it seems like during quarantine, everybody else is posting. And I'm like, when they zig, you're Sorry about that. Got to unmute myself. So, no, I haven't been posting as much on Instagram because when everybody else is kind of zigging when it comes to cooking, and so I'm trying to zag right now and come up with something new to do. But I'm still cooking every single night. Like once we get off here, we're gonna have some steak sandwiches from a little steak we cooked up last night. But dude, this game for me was huge, and I'm honored to be on here with the other guest co-host because this is one of those times where I'll never forget it. Like those times where you can look into your parents' eyes and they're like, "You did a thing." And one of the first times that happened was when Meet the Heels Day 2003, when Woody Durham called my name out when I ran out of the tunnel and I threw a T-shirt out, and my dad was like, "Oh my God, Woody Durham said your name." And the same goes for the next, his partner for so many years, and a guy that we listened to, cut the sound off. Sorry, Jefferson Pilot, but we cut the sound off and we listened to the radio broadcast.
Well, since you kind of teased him, I think we should probably go ahead and go to him. Folks, you may know him as the guy on the skins for the Franklin Street Band. If not, you probably heard him doing play-by-play for the main guides. That's where a lot of folks, really got their fix with him doing some minor league ball. He was the North Carolina Sportscaster of the Year in 1999. And he's been working with some big NFL league team out of Charlotte since 2005. You also may remember he was, the other half of the broadcast with Woody Durham for a long time, and they weren't just promoting Beefmasters. Mick Mixon, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing fantastic. It's great hearing your voice, Joey. Good to see you. Good to be on here with Felder. I'm not on social media. I believe that scarcity breeds momentum, but I try to kind of keep up with you guys from a distance, and it's a blast. So many names. Michael mentioned Woody, and you did too. And we missed the Woodman, Chuck the Chest, coaching NC State, huge personality. I used to go over to get an in-person interview. I would try to get an in-person interview with every opposing head coach, football or basketball. I just believed, and Woody did too, that our broadcast should have some journalistic balance to it. Chuck Amato one time, his secretary said, Chuck is waiting for you, second door down the hall to the left. So I walked down the NC State Football Center, down the hallway, and the second door on the left was the bathroom. This isn't going to win Chuck Amato the Pulitzer Prize for comedy, but it just got all over him. He thought he had just pulled the funniest thing ever, sending me into the bathroom. I don't really care. I mean, it's fine. We do the interview in there if you need to. And then, on the UNC side, Darian Durant, I love Darian Durant. I used to call him superstar. Underrated, don't you think, Michael? Just as an accurate, calm, a little more athletic than he got credit for. He understood offensive football. He kind of knew what I think Gary Tranquil wanted and vice versa. And, authored so many great moments during his career.
Oh, man. So I'm watching this game today, and I'm taking my notes, and I keep pulling the computer over to my wife and being like, look at this. This is what happened. Remember, this is what happened. And for me, as a guy that didn't get in the game, but I was on scout team, I knew everything that our offense did. And you hit the nail on the head. We called him D-Block, right? And D-Block was our heart and soul as a football team. He was a guy that was so cool, so calm under pressure, and he could do if he was playing in today's football with today's kind of those spread offenses and working RPOs and doing those things that are more and people weren't worried about height so much.
Yeah.
I think he could have really, and listen, no disrespect, he's had a heck of a career in Canada. He's done so well. But he could be in the league as a successful, productive guy because he was so good and so strong and so talented. And I mean, I love TJ Yates. He's a really good friend of mine, but man, I think D-Block for me, listen, I know we got Keldorf and Oscar Davenport and Ron C. and these guys just like in my lifetime, but for me, D-Block, that's that guy. Like he was the man.
No, you got to give Jason Finley Stanisiak some love too. Another guy that looked like, if you saw Jason walk up, You think this is maybe the intern for the Tar Heel Sports Network, but man, he could play. He ran that shell game, that option. But Darian Durant, the thing I loved about Darian, one of the things is that even at 20 years old, he looked like, to me, he was about a 38-year-old man.
He looked like me right now.
So what does he look like now?
He looks the same. He looks the same. He looks exactly the same. I'm watching these Canada clips, and he looks exactly the same. The same, like, little beard, the same, like, stout body type. Like, he looks the same. So, listen, he's not really aging. He's up there living his best life.
He won't remember me, I'm sure, but if you ever talk to him, I wish you would tell him that Mick said to say what's up.
There we go.
I love that Mick dropped Stanisek's full government name there. That was impressive. All right, guys, so we've kind of set the table for this ball game. I want to ask you both, and Mick, I'll go to you first. What do you remember about this game before rewatching it? Mick, what was the thing that stuck out for you? I mean, there's the giant plate of food right there in front of you if we want to take it, but what may have jumped out at you in your memory? What was your indelible memory of this game before looking at it again?
Well, just that Carolina, it felt in the moment like Carolina had to have this game. You mentioned, Joey, the good start by NC State, and North Carolina had played, I think, fairly well in the Louisville loss, did some good things, just couldn't quite close the deal. And I think, with John Bunting, the great Buntino, as the head coach, this felt like a home game that North Carolina really needed. And State's coming in rolling. They got the big bopper, T.A. McClendon. And North Carolina's defense was very, very young. There was some talent, but particularly up front. I mean, you had just a green as a gourd defense that, I mean, it was worrisome because State had, and my memory of it is, not only did State have McClendon, but they also had a good receiving core. They had some striders, some speed, and it just looked to me like the kind of game that could shape up to be memorable. And North Carolina put 30 on them. What was the score? Wasn't it 30-24? I may be jumping ahead a bit, but I'm thinking North Carolina was up 6 when State mounted that drive late in the game.
Spot on. You nailed it. It's like, just like yesterday. Felder, what was your indelible memory outside of the 30-page novella that you put together of notes? What was your memory of the game before we went back to it?
So here, I've got the memory of the game where obviously we're going to talk about TA and the whole deal. But for me, everything was inside that building. Everything was smaller. And so it was, I remember our punter, David Wooldridge, had been suspended, 2 weeks before because he was stealing DVDs. I remember that. And I remember that was the first time that he had ever not traveled. So we snuck into Kenan Stadium and we grabbed a couple of those free T-shirts that they put out on the bleachers, and that's part of going into that game. I think about the repercussions of this game, which was the last time that I got to play football with a couple of my teammates because they ended up getting suspended and moved off the football team, and that really stunk because those guys are good. And then obviously we see AD balling out in Canada as well with D-Block, so that's a really cool thing that it was able to come to that. Let's Go. Do you guys remember that song, Let's Go by Trick Daddy?
Yes.
I think this was the first game where that song took prominence for us. So that was on my mind. And the other part was we really wanted to beat this team, and I get it. And I know that people nationally on a big scale think about UNC and Duke as the rivalry, but in that locker room for football, it's UNC versus NC State. It's guys that we played football with and against in high school, and it meant so much. And off the field, we had gotten to a big fight with them at Avalon, which was a club off Rosemary in Chapel Hill, next to Murder Mart. And we got banned from Avalon as a football team, and they pepper sprayed all of us, and it was bad. We won the fight, though. We lost the football game the year before, but we won the fight. But I remember us thinking, we cannot lose to these guys anymore. There was just so much animosity and anger and frustration. And this was one of those games where Coach Bunting, and I remember that week in practice, the amount of hate, and I'm glad for the clips that you sent, because those the email that you sent, the clip that you sent, showed us leading up to the game, and it showed us in our meeting room where we're all just like, go to hell state. And that was pregame. Everybody in that locker room knew we wanted to win this football game. We had to win this football game. And then, man, watching the game, and I look at the box score, we should not have won this football game.
I love
State had the ball. State possessed the ball a lot during the game. They had the ball. I don't have the stats, but it seemed like it. Yeah, and I was not in that club that night. I wasn't at the fight. If I had been, I would have been looking for Tony Haynes, my counterpart on the NC State radio network, because I think I could have taken him and still could in a fair fight. But and I do remember the song "Let's Go," but I remember "Let's Go" by Richie Valens, which would have been probably in the late 50s, not the version that you're alluding to, Michael. But my friend Lee Pace, you guys know noted football writer Lee Pace. Mm-hmm. Leroy sent me his copy of Extra Points, the newsletter that he wrote, expertly written, that the summary of this game. And I had forgotten, and Michael, you'll be expert on this, but Lee's reporting was that North Carolina had some vicious full contact goal line practices leading up to that game because of some missed opportunities to stop some teams prior to this. Am I right in channeling Lee's memory of that season?
100%. We did full team goal line, tackle to the ground, everybody except Darian Durant. We did full team goal line the 2 weeks leading up to that because we had really screwed up in previous games, and we screwed up in the season before against was it Syracuse or Syracuse. Against Syracuse, we screwed up in goal line, and we had this new defense, new defensive coordinators, John Gutekunst. We had Marvin Sanders. We had this new defense, and that was a thing watching the game for me, Mick and Joey. That like, oh my God, I know this defense, and I'm seeing all the little inflections and the little changes that we're making. But we worked hard on that goal line stuff because we had messed up, and it had cost us football games, and we didn't want to have it cost us up until this point, the biggest game of our season.
Mick, I appreciate you bringing that up. That was something that in the post game, Coach Bunning actually talked about Tommy Richardson coming up and saying to him, "Hey, Coach, aren't you glad we practiced all that goal line stuff now?" And Bunning remembers. Bunning actually had forgotten that they'd done it in the hubbub of the game, and actually said, "You know what? I'm glad we did." I appreciate you guys. Yeah, I appreciate you guys bringing up that little complexity that had happened over the course of game prep. Mick, do you remember much about the flow of this game? I mean, a second ago, Felder alluded to the just absolute huge tilt towards NC State as far as the box score goes. Total yards was 577 to 356. Time of possession, as you said, Mick, was way slanted. Do you remember much about the flow of this game?
No. I remember I really had to go to the bathroom early in the third quarter. Let me see what else stands out. I think that the crowd – I remember the crowd being a really good atmosphere at Kenan, befitting of a rival game like this. I remember Madison Hedgecock being and I can't quote you. I don't know really if Madison was a factor in this game, but I love Madison Hedgecock. This old farm boy, he had an appetite for contact. He would play any position if he got a chance to crush somebody's skull. And I do know that exactly. And I do know that he had actually flipped over to try to help the team some and played some D line, maybe some DN. Did he scratch? Did he play some defensive snaps in this game?
Not in this game. He did actually make a special teams tackle, but did not have any snaps on defensive end. Felder, I'll let you speak to that, but I know Mick's exactly right. They'd been using Mad Dog on both sides of the ball.
Didn't he play well that night? I think he had some carries, though, on offense, right?
10 carries for 69 yards. We're going to get to it a little bit when we talk about our players of the game. But, yeah, he had quite an impact, especially in the fourth quarter, just, going for guys' souls. Absolutely. Mike, do you remember much about him playing both sides of the ball?
So Mad Dog played. I'm trying to think. I think Madison Hedgecock from Ledford High School. Shout out to he. I can't remember what he used to say. He used to say something about, I'm from so-and-so, but my address is in Kernersville, because his mailbox was like right over the line. But his house was in a different, actually technically a different city limits or something. But he's from Ledford High School. He's an absolute monster. I loved playing with him. I actually did, when I was doing Hustle Team, I was in the People's double team with him and Malik Brown when we were one of the tops in the country in kick return. And I used to just run into Malik Brown and Madison Hedgecock every day. And that was just my job. And so, it wasn't easy for a young guy. But with Madison in this game, Madison played defense, I believe, the season before is where he was mostly on defense. And then this season they flipped him back to running back. And what I remember about that was he was punishing guys. And I also remember, people didn't know this, but Jock Lewis was hurt. Yeah. He was hurt, like, for real. And I don't think people realize how much he was hurt. I think he might have had, like, I don't know if it was, like, a hairline fracture or something in his foot that we were trying to kind of cover up's not the right word, but, like, keep out of the press so that NC State didn't know about it. And he had to put, like, a plate in his shoe so that he could run, and you could see he didn't have the same spring that he usually had. And
he couldn't plant at all. You're exactly right.
Yeah, he couldn't plant. And so at one point there was a lot of pain, and Madison had to play real running back, which meant my guy, Ricky Cook, had to be the fullback. And you throw Cook in the game, and he's the fullback. And now you got two guys that weigh 250 some odd pounds coming downhill at you. And you could tell there were moments where they didn't really want it. And they adjusted their game plan once they realized that Madison was going to be the real running back, not just the guy that's back there blocking. And they got a little heavier and they got a little bit more sand in their pants. But, man, it was those first couple carries for him were really – it was cool to see, because he did so much in practice and worked so hard and did so much dirty work. To see him get to carry the football was really, really cool.
Mick, I remember, and this was something I think you were leading to a second ago. I specifically remember in this game, before we rewatched it and then confirmed it rewatching it, if you watch in the fourth quarter, State's tacklers wanted no part of Madison Hedgecock whatsoever. There was a 4th and 1 in the fourth quarter where UNC needed to keep the chains moving and tried to extend their lead and keep grinding the clock out. They went 4th and 1. They handed it to Mad Dog. He went outside, and just the two guys that tried to tackle him. And State had some studs. I mean, some real dogs on their defense at the time. But you could look when you watch this replay that they wanted no part of tackling him head up. Just none at all.
As a former little guy, I'm going to tell you this as a guy that played safety, who's bigger now, but as a former small guy, I didn't either. Like, no. Like, they wouldn't – we used to do ram drills with safeties, linebackers, and the running backs, and they were like, you can't go against Madison, you can't go against Ricky Cook, you can't go against Dokuno Lagake, you can't go against these guys because they will destroy you. And we saw that in a game action where he just smashed their soul.
Hedgecock was a handful in the league. He had some more than just a cup of coffee in the NFL. I remember him with the Giants, and one time, Gary Tranquil, I was standing there at practice, and Gary Tranquil gets irate with Madison Hedgecock. So you got Tranquil slams his baseball cap on the ground, and he reaches up and he grabs Madison Hedgecock by the face mask and yanks him down to him. And he says, "Son, can I trust you to put you in a game?" And Hedgecock looks at Gary Tranquil and through his helmet says, "No, sir."
Oh, man, that brutal honesty.
I loved it.
I can't. Oh my goodness, that you bringing up Trank with the face mask grab to get you down to his level. I've had that. Everyone that's played with him or played for him has had that. I showed a picture of him to my wife today, and she was like, "This is the guy that you're terrified of?" And I was like, "Yes, he was." He takes that hat off, he slams it on the ground, he grabs your face mask, he looks you in the eye, tells you how dumb you are and what you're doing wrong, and then all you can do is just be like, "You're right, you know what? On that blitz, I did get too close to the quarterback. I messed up very badly. That's my fault."
I got so many great Gary Tranquil stories, but most of them I can't tell on the podcast because they have unspeakably
The language.
horrible words, and the stories just aren't the same without that.
I respect the authorship and the voice there. All right, so we've talked a little bit about kind of the nuance of the game itself. I'm going to go ahead and just give a giant bear hug to the elephant in the room. Let's talk about TA's knee being down. Mick, what do you remember about the chaos? The absolute. And again, going back and rewatching, you and Woody had the unenviable task of trying to sort out what was going on in the field without anybody telling you, because again, it was a local broadcast. You guys were the radio guys that were synced up with a camera. Do you remember much about how you guys had to watch that and then relaying it to the audience? And then what were your thoughts as just a guy taking all that in?
Well, looking back on this game, 2004 October, I'd forgotten a lot about the game, and I tried to retrofit a few of the nuances and subtleties of the game back into my mind for our visit tonight. But I remember in the moment thinking, this feels like the most important thing in your life. I mean, just the froze, the emotions. It looks like State's gonna kick an extra point and win it, but then, oh no, wait. I'd love to know, was it Courtney Mosey's crew? I do not know whose officiating crew it was. I'd love to know who the referee was in that game. Oh, Jim Knight. Oh God, what a great official. One of the all-time greats.
That's part of the conspiracy, right? Like, our friends from Raleigh have this conspiracy that because of what happened with Jim Knight's health at University of Chapel Hill Hospital, that's one of their things, is that's why Jim Knight's crew didn't allow TA to get that touchdown.
Well, there's also people that think that the moon landing was a government hoax, and we could go on, but Jim Knight, if you know anything about Jim Knight, and I worked as a color analyst for 16 seasons on the Tar Heel Sports Network, and for 16 years I attended the ACC football officiating clinic every summer. They rotated it around to a different campus, and it did not matter whether it was College Park, Maryland, Tallahassee, Florida, Duke, Carolina, Wake. It didn't matter. I was there. The officials were so gracious to welcome me in. I wasn't trying to be boys with them. I just knew that there's nothing worse than a color analyst that's not nimble with the playing rules. College football rules are different than high school rules. They're different than NFL rules. And I wanted to educate myself on the mechanics, rule changes, points of emphasis. And I got to know many of these men in the process. Jim Knight is one of the classiest, most gracious gentlemen. And on my grandson's life, Jim Knight would never make a call because of anything. He was all of them prided themselves on being impartial and just trying to call the game in a fair way. And I'd say that doesn't matter to me. I mean, the outcome seemed important then, but the quality of our lives is not affected by who wins or loses these games. But if his knee was down, then it was down.
His whole body was on the ground.
Thanks, Mike.
That's all I'm saying. His whole body was on the ground. We watched this a lot of times after that. We watched every angle. We watched all of it. His body was laying on the ground. He didn't get in. I stand by it. I stick by it. I believe it. I know it. And then obviously we get to the play that changes everything, the final play. Or not the final play, because the play before the final play, the fumble. And man, you mentioned that we were really young up front, Mick, and to see guys like Terry Hunter, Khalif Mitchell go out and make plays. We saw Tommy Davis get hurt earlier in the game. To see
Malik
those
Brown
guys
was
go
a
out.
sophomore. I mean, how many snaps did he get that game?
Malik was, I think, he's a redshirt sophomore, and Malik is another guy that he was young. These guys hadn't played a ton of snaps. You talk about Larry Edwards and Fred Sparkman in that second level as linebackers going to make plays. T. Rich had been converted from a safety to a linebacker to try to help in that game. And listen, I love T. Rich. Like, that's my guy. Like, he there were moments in game when he would ask me what's happening because I could get a different view because I'm standing on the bench watching, and he knew I had an idea of what I was talking about. So it was one of those things where that group they were young. They had some leadership though. Jonas Seawright was a big boy who slimmed down for that final season, who wanted to work, and he made some plays. And Puff was young. He was a sophomore. We came in the same year, and obviously he didn't finish out with us at UNC, but him and Fred those guys were making plays, and we juggled that young athleticism of like a Fred Sparkman or a Larry Edwards with older guys that weren't quite as athletic, like Jeff Longhaney and Doug Justice. But that final play, I mean, you've got a sophomore and a freshman going to make plays where Khalif makes a play and then Kareen recovers the fumble. And Kareen is one of my favorite football players that I've ever been around. He's awesome. And I know we haven't talked about Gerald Sensabaugh. I think that's more of a Miami thing. But I think Gerald Sensabaugh probably taught me more about football than I've learned from anyone, because I used to just get to sit with him in Kenan in the building and watch film with him and just learn what you're supposed to look for.
Michael, do you remember any sort of uniform or equipment malfunction that may have happened prior to that last play of Khalif Mitchell, Mount Mitchell, I think as Woody used to call him, making that hit, and then Kareem Taylor making that fumble pickoff? Is there anything about that?
I think this is the play where Kareem had my helmet on. I think this is the play where Kareem, because I think something happened with the snap on his helmet, and they didn't have time to fix it, so I had to give him my helmet. But then when I went back and watched it, we had different face masks, so it might have been the Miami game where I actually had to give him my helmet. But either way, Kareem wore my helmet in some critical moments because he broke a snap on his helmet, and I had to give it to him.
What about the mouthpiece?
No. Oh.
I don't want to know.
Got him.
No, this was – I think I actually went back and looked, Joey. I think it was – because I know I said it was this game. I think it was the Miami game. But this was one of the – but this game – because I looked at the face mask. And I don't know if you know this, but in that video at 4:31, you can see Michael Felder mean mug to the camera coming out of the tunnel. And I have a different face mask than the one that Kareem has. So I think it's the Miami game, not this game. But he did wear my helmet in a couple critical moments in a game.
All right. Well, so let's hit two more segments that I want to toss to you guys before we put a bow on this thing. I always try to to call this segment "This Guy," right? Like
yep.
Mick, John Gruden's analysis always includes, well, here's a guy who did blah, 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 and this guy does blah, blah, blah. Mick, who was your this guy for the game against NC State in 04?
I guess it'd probably be Darian Durant. Hopefully that you don't think I'm cheaping out, but just we talked earlier about how State dominated time of possession. So for North Carolina to put up 30, I remember that North Carolina's offense was pretty efficient in maximizing the chances that they did get to put 30 points up. And Durant, I think there were at that time still some questions about could he function at that level? Just exactly what did UNC have in this trigger man? And I just remember thinking that a lot of the way he just seemed like his pulse rate was about 55 during the game, and he executed with a cool-like efficiency and answered some questions if there were any lingering outside the building. I know in the building the belief in Darian Durant was absolute, but among Tar Heel fans, kids showed he was not going to disappear in big games.
To that end, Mick, Darian Durant, 15 of 23 for a cool 65% completion, 192 total yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. QB rating was 178.4 on the day. And to that point, he was very, very timely. Didn't make any mistakes, but when Carolina needed a big play, Double D was spot on. So I'm not going to fault that pick at all. I think that's a great call. Felder, who was your this guy?
Man, looking at this, and I wrote so many guys down. Goodness gracious. Obviously, Darian Durant, D-block is amazing. I wrote Larry Edwards. He had the interception that essentially got us in position to seal the game, or at least have an opportunity to seal the game. And the reason I wrote him down is because Larry always wanted to be a running back. Even if you look at his linebacker stance, he lined up like he was a running back. So I put him down. I put someone who probably doesn't get a lot of credit, but Jason Brown, the center, who just found a way to make plays and had a really good NFL career as well. But Jay Brown, and then obviously Madison Hedgecock. And for me, I will say this. A lot of people like out in the world know him as Mr. Fourth and Long. I know him as Jesse Holley. And I'm going with Jesse. I think if I had to pick one person, I'm going to go with Jesse. 2 reasons. One, the fumble recovery that he had after Adarius Bowman fumbles the football. Jesse is always on that hustle making a play, and he scooped that thing up and was able to give us a first down instead of giving the ball back to NC State, which I think is humongous. And then the other one is the touchdown that he scores where he sits the ball down on the ground and then flexes to the crowd. That's a play called sucker. And Mick talking about Trank reminded me of that week of practice where they kept running that play and we kept stopping that play. And Trank had one of those fits where he threw his hat down because he goes, do what they're going to do in the game. And because we had seen the play so many times, we knew it's a fake screen over the top to Jesse. But he's like, NC State doesn't know it's a fake screen. They're going to be looking for the screen. Play the screen and then try to get to the thing and give us a good look. And he's yelling at all of us. And lo and behold, this guy's a genius. The play worked perfectly. Jesse's wide open in the end zone. And for me, I mean, it was just, oh, man. And the play worked so perfectly, and it was beautiful. And he drew it up perfect, and it worked perfect. And Darian Durant executed it perfect. Jesse faked it perfect. So I'm going to go with Jesse. And then a shout out to a game. I'm sure you're going to do this game at some point later, the 04 Miami game. But Jesse running down the interception when he was not as fast as that guy, but he just wanted it a little bit more. Jesse, for me, he's a guy that works really hard. And for me, I think he belongs in that list for guys that are, this is the guy for this game.
You're our counterpart here on the panel tonight, Mr. Mixon, actually dubbed him after that fumble recovery, Jesse on the spot.
Yes.
So we got to make sure we give some points for wit in the time there. My guy was Madison Hedgecock. I already mentioned it.
Sure.
Let the cat out the bag earlier, but the guy just showed up when the bright lights were on, and against NC State's NFL talent-laden defense, absolutely had them caving at the point of attack in the fourth quarter when Carolina had to get some ground yards.
Dude,
all right.
Mario Williams, Manny Lawson, McCargo, like that.
Tank Tyler, Steven Tulloch. I mean, they had some dogs, man. They really did.
Whew.
All right. Last part before we go home. And Mick, I'll kick this one to you first. Now, we talked earlier about, what was your indelible feeling, before you thought about this game. Now that we've kind of conjured up some new stuff, is there anything that kind of rose to the top that you hadn't thought about in a while, or maybe this rewatch made you think about something that you hadn't really considered in at least 16 years?
Connor Barth hit a 50-yard field goal in that game. Points were quite naturally key with the tightness of the game in the fourth quarter.
Yep.
I don't think it was I'll only speak for myself. I cringe a little bit when this game is brought up because I don't think it was one of your humble correspondent's greatest broadcasts, because I think I kind of turned fan a little bit late, and I think you would not view this as perceptive, insightful commentary, but I think what came out of my mouth prior to the fourth down play was, how are you going to stop T.A. McClendon from point blank range? But the Tar Heels did it.
That's you know what? When I was rewatching it, actually, it jumped out at me that you were kind of almost being over even keel and kind of pointing out to everybody that this guy is absolutely automatic. He was averaging over 100 yards per game on the ground. I think that works, especially with you mentioned Connor Barth's 53-yarder that tied the game early. Felder, what did this rewatch make you feel, man? What was all right? What memory did this stir up for you? Get in your feelings for us.
I'm gonna go quick. On the field, I think that John Hamlet's touchdown, That was a play that we put into our playbook because Syracuse did it to us the year before, and it's where he blocks and then kind of leaks out, and it was beautiful. The diamond formation, it didn't work out for us because NC State had a blitz coming, but that diamond formation is something I remember vividly from practice as like a new thing that we were putting in, 4x1 formation. Gerald Sensabaugh liked to slice everything. And when I say slice, I mean that he liked to exchange responsibilities with the corner when you had a cut split, when a wide receiver had a short split, or it was a tight end on the end of the formation, he would slice it, and the corner would take the deep half, and he would come down and make tackles. And I just kept seeing it on film and being like, that's Gerald. He wants to be involved in the play. And then here's the reality. The biggest thing that I thought about, if you watch this play and you watch the TA stop, and everybody thinks about the Khalif Mitchell running one hand up, there's a guy number 84. He's a doctor now named Sam Heathcote. And he got his helmet stolen because we used to put our helmets under the bench. And he ran out onto the field to celebrate without his helmet, and a fan stole his helmet. And it completely changed the way that we reacted in the Miami game because none of us wanted to get in trouble for having our helmets stolen. We all put them on and just ran through people. And this NC State game is also where I got a cut from the middle of my forehead across my nose because a fan crashed into me and I'm just bleeding in the locker room. They're like, how are you bleeding? You didn't get in the game. And I'm like, I don't know how I'm bleeding either. I don't know. I don't know what happened, but those are all the kind of the things that kind of like came back to me. Kendreus Guy being just a worker too. Man, yes, I know. That's why I had to shout him out. He was a worker. So yeah, and obviously it sucked not getting to play with Puff and Fred and AD again. But man, we had a really this October. This was probably the best October that I had as a football player at UNC because we beat NC State. We went on to beat Miami. I mean, we beat Miami Halloween weekend in Chapel Hill, and you guys both know how insane that is, Halloween weekend by itself. You throw in beating the number 4 team in the country, and things get a little weird.
Mick, you don't have any UPIs, any unidentified post-game injuries from this game, do you?
Yeah, Don Bunning chest bumped me, and I still have soreness throughout my sternum.
Thoracic tenderness. He's doubtful to return. Guys.
Exactly. I just want to say before we ring off, listen to Michael talk, and you can tell it's so vivid for him. And for people like me, I always knew I could do it. I could play football if my mother had not smoked and drank so much during my gestation. But to hear, I just want you to know, Michael, for every one of you, there's thousands and thousands and thousands of people like Joey and me who got to carry mics and tape recorders and notepads around, but we would give anything to have put on a uniform and run through the paper mache or run through that big thing with the cheerleaders and out onto the field just one time. So I'm proud of you and your many successes. And Joey, same goes with you, man. Thanks for reaching out to me tonight.
No problem. Well, we're going to put a bow on this one. I want to give a special thanks to Mick Mixon, Carolina Panthers play-by-play guy. We're going to have NFL football again sometime. Mick's going to be your guy on the radio. Want to give a shout-out to my buddy Mike Felder at In the Bleachers. Also, check him out at watchstadium.com. He knows more about breaking down film than anybody I know. Special shout-out again to Johnny T-Shirt for sponsoring us. Again, go to Apple, review us, Google Play, review us, rate us, whatever. If you don't like what we're doing, give us a heads up. Hit us on the message boards or shoot us an email or whatever. Take care of us. But I'm so thankful for Mick, for Felder. This is a 30-24 Carolina win over NC State. I don't care what anybody says. I'm going off of what the record books and the box score says now. But please stick around after the break. I'm going to have a one-on-one post-game with Brian Chacos, who was starting offensive lineman in this game. Shaq's back, and we're going to talk to him. So stick around after the break. We'll have Chacos in. For Felder and for Mick, I want to say thank you very much, and we'll catch you guys after the break. All right, everybody. I appreciate you being back with us. Thanks for sticking around after the break. Once again, I want to shout out to Mick Mixon and Michael Felder for being here. for the first part of our discussion of 2004 UNC versus NC State game. And with us right now, this sexy human being, number 65 in your programs, but number 1 in your hearts.
That's right.
Ladies and gentlemen, the guy that you just saw in the 2004 NC State game, absolutely just all over the screen, finishing blocks, getting some whistles after the play, but just all about it. Brian Chacos. Brian, how the hell are you?
Hey, buddy. I'm good, Joey. Good to see you. Good to hear your voice. Happy quarantine. It's good to be on with you. And man, when you hit me up and texted me to talk about this game, it brought back such great memories. Such good feelings of hatred. So it's going to be awesome to spend some time with you talking about it. It's funny. I spent some time with my son, my 3-year-old son, Jax, the other morning. We were watching this past year's Carolina NC State game over at Carter Finley. That turned into an absolute beatdown. So even my 3-year-old is now learning about the rivalry and the hatred.
You shouldn't let your kids see violence like that on television.
That's exactly right. But it is good to start them even early at 3 to know about the hatred at NC State.
Well, you know what? It's obvious that you know where I'm going to go first.
Yeah.
My first question was just let's go ahead and headlong into it. Tell me about your true feelings for North Carolina State University in Raleigh.
Yeah, I mean it's UNC Raleigh, and it's just the epitome of just Bush League people. Only just focusing on their football program. It really starts from the top down, and that's kind of the way I felt about their program for the longest time. I've kind of been raised in the way to feel like that. My dad obviously played at Carolina from 71 to 74 for Coach Dooley. I've been coming to Carolina football weekends and Letterman weekends since the 2nd grade. And I've just kind of been all about this rivalry and known about what it's like to play in that game. And then having, been in the program as long as I was in the program and had the opportunity to start and play in 4 different opportunities against NC State, and just feel what that game is like, to know and play for Coach Bunning, who was a great Tar Heel, and kind of understand and really appreciate what older generations, how they respect the game and the rivalry, and then taking that on as kind of the next generation of guys. It's really special. But again, man, the hatred runs really deep. It still does. Even as a 37, soon to be 38-year-old dad, proud husband, father of 2. Man, I hate the Wolfpack. Hate them now to this day, and love every opportunity to go against them in anything, but especially in football, for sure.
This is going to be great because when we put this out to the InsideCarolina.com universe, they're going to absolutely salivate over this tasty red meat we're throwing to you and to them.
Absolutely,
okay,
man.
so you mentioned the link to your dad.
Yeah.
But you coming from, being the de facto mayor of Darien, Connecticut, at what point did it really hit you, you know, as you got to college? At what point did it really hit you like, oh my God, I want to murder these guys?
So, yeah, I mean, that's a great question. So I medically redshirted, then I medically redshirted in 2001. I redshirted in 2002. And then my first opportunity to really play in the rivalry game was in 2003 at Carter Finley. Philip Rivers had a great game in 2003 at Carter Finley. And the first time where I was like, I really hate these freaking people was when I was going out to warmups with the offensive linemen. And our strength and conditioning coach told us, you guys need to wear your helmets for warmups. Well, you never wear your helmets for warmups. We're going out stretching. At that time we had our, we didn't have AirPods in. We had our wires, our cords, our big bulky ear.
Cans.
Yeah, your cans on. So we're looking at them like, why do we need that? And the reason why is because they were throwing rocks and batteries at us on the field while we were just stretching and warming up. And so that kind of just shows you the kind of low-class people that they are, even stemming from their fan base, and then to the stuff that goes down on the field. Now, again, to say that I was the cleanest or nicest player out in the field, that wouldn't be correct. I mean, I like to hit after the whistle.
You've admitted to being bottom of the pile guy.
And I like to pick people off the pile too. If you're standing around the pile, don't stand around the pile. But it even to the NC State level goes a little bit below them as well. So you really, that was, Joey, that was in 2003. I mean, that's when you really knew that fan base and that football program really kind of was going to be the game that, and I'm going to sidetrack here for a little bit. I've heard some analysts, I've heard some people on Inside Carolina, some different blogs, some different sites where we get former players that'll come on and say, yeah, when we play NC State, it's kind of just another game. And, we're always excited to play when you put it. That's total BS. That is BS. When you play in this game, in this rivalry, you crank it up to 110. I mean, every time you put on the Carolina uniform, you give it 100%. But, dude, when you see that NC State red, there's just a different switch. I mean, it's a different switch that I am so glad that our kids have found this past year in when we played in Carter Finley this past season. And I'll tell you, damn what you want to say about Coach Bunning.
Yeah.
But my man was 4-2 against NC State. He was 5-1 against Duke. And when it came down to the rivalry games, he knew how to take care of our rivals. And, he made that something where his players understood that.
So you're literally plucking them right off my card here for me. I was going to ask the
Sorry,
next question was, no, it's perfect. It's what we like to call in the business a segue. I wanted you to talk a little bit about, you always hear about how coaches have different ways of motivating their guys. And specifically Coach Bunning, he made his feelings known about NC State and also about their head man. What do you remember that? And talk to us a little bit about Coach Bunning and how he radiated it to you guys about the hatred, how he stoked it, and how he got you fired up for this game.
Sure. I mean, there was definitely stuff that you would read about in the News and Observer leading up to the game. You would see it on, WRAL and ABC 11 and Mark Armstrong and Jeff Gravely and all those guys leading up to the games, right? But then you'd see it in pregame warmups. I mean, we weren't naive and oblivious to seing kind of the feelings. Nowadays you see the coaches meet at half field and it's all chummy and it's like, everyone's got their second houses in, Grandfather Mountain or Nantucket together. Dude, Coach Bunning and Chuck Amato, those two guys are polar opposite kind of guys. And so you could see how badly they wanted to beat each other and how much they wanted to take their programs to the next step. And especially JB being, obviously a Carolina guy and him wanting so much success for our program. I think you really saw the hatred between those two guys really get amped up in 2005 when we played back at Carter Finley. That NC State team was loaded on paper. They had one of the better defenses in the country in 05. And that's when Chuck and JB had to be separated pregame at midfield. They were literally chest to chest, face to face. And my money would have been on JB. I mean, JB is just a big bulldog. And he had the size advantage on Chuck. So, it's one of those things. You could feel the hatred with those two guys. It really started in 04. It kind of festered all off season. The pigskin preview in July, they have it to carry Embassy Suites, and some stuff that was said in the off season about whether that TA touchdown went in, and then obviously the fumble in 04. And then it really came to a head in 05. But you could tell, man, I mean, it really, and I can tell you some other things, Joey. I mean, in our team meetings before those games against NC State, I mean, there was no complicated team meeting. There was no X's and O's and scheming. It was just, let's come out and pound their ass. I mean, beat them down, run the football, play tough defense. Let's make some special teams plays, and let's just get after their ass. That was it.
Well, you talk about beating them down, and certainly one of the highlights that we talked about in the earlier part of the show was a young man from Ledford named Madison Hedgecock as an offensive lineman. How much did you love in the third and fourth quarter as an offensive lineman seeing a guy like Madison Hedgecock just truck sticking, what was essentially an NFL caliber defense in multiple positions? Yeah,
let me tell you something about Madison Hedgecock, man. Madison Hedgecock is an offensive lineman's best friend. I mean, Madison Hedgecock was one of those guys that was, besides the quarterbacks, Madison was one of those guys who could come hang out with the offensive lineman without any invitation. He had like a free pass. I mean, Madison was just a different kind of breed of dude. He was just a guy who played hard, worked out hard, I mean, he ate his cheeseburger at Sutton's Hall. I mean, he just like he just was rough, man. I mean, he just was a tough dude, a tough rural North Carolina kid who he was full tilt at everything he did. But when we got on the football field, man, he wanted to just beat your ass. That's all. I mean, really, that's all he wanted to do is just beat your ass. And he kind of had the same amount of hatred for NC State that I do. And he still does. It was great to see him. I saw him about a year ago, and he's doing great. He's up near High Point, and he's on his tractor up in High Point with he's doing terrific. But you know, he and I just talked about how much he loved running the football that night, how much he loved playing fullback, and what he loved to do was just run through the hole and just block linebackers. I mean, there aren't a lot of people walking the face of the earth that say, you know, one of my favorite things to do is run through the line of scrimmage and run full speed at another human being who weighs about 230, 240 pounds. Yeah. But Madison Hedgecock does. So it's special when you finally have one of those guys on your team, and not to mention he's just a great guy too.
That's pretty juicy. We were talking in the earlier part of the show just about how in that fourth quarter, when you guys needed a score, they wanted no part of trying to tackle him straight up. None, zero. You could tell. No. And again, it was an NFL caliber defense in multiple positions.
No doubt about it.
Speaking of that defense, what was your memory of the different components of that defense? I mean, you're talking about a guy like Manny Lawson,
Mario Williams.
I mean, you were going
Stephen
face up with at least one of those guys on every snap. Talk about him.
Yeah, well, the thing that comes to my mind was NFL caliber. It was NFL caliber. It was, leading up to that week to the game, I was thinking to myself, it's going to be 60 minutes. It's going to be 60 minutes of, going full tilt in a rivalry game. This isn't like playing Duke. Duke is, I'll kind of probably shouldn't say this, but I'm going to say it now. But, when we were playing Duke back then, the early 2000s, that was a game where you're like, man, I hope I get like a grade out of like a 96, 97, because I'm going to beat the absolute hell out of whoever I have lining across from me against
pancake
Duke.
Breakfast.
It's going to be, I'm just going to crush whoever I have, the scrawny little defensive end from Duke for 60 minutes. I'm just going to beat his ass. But when you see, Mario Williams, who ended up being the first overall draft pick in his draft, and then Manny Lawson, who ended up being a first round draft pick that year as well, I thought to myself, it's going to be long. It's going to be a long night. And again, as I said earlier, it's a rivalry game. It's going to be cranked up even more. So, then you had Tank Tyler. You had Stephen Tulloch on the second level linebacker. You had A.J. Davis, who was in the secondary, who was a Carolina commit, and then who ended up flipping to NC State on signing day, who that blistered a lot of Carolina fans. And then they had a lot of other talented guys. Pat Thomas, who you mentioned earlier in the show. And, so we knew it was a big night. It was a big night. But the thing that I remember most was how electric Kenan Stadium was. Man, our fans showed up. Our donors showed up. It was a great environment. It was loud. It was raucous. It was just an awesome crowd. It just shows what Kenan Stadium can consistently be like. And even in 2020, even what we're going through now, and hopefully we get cleared through all the stuff they're going through now, Kenan Stadium is a pretty cool place to take in a football game.
Yeah.
Beautiful setting, loud acoustics when you get the fans going, and it's also an awesome place to see some football.
That's, when we rewatched this game, I remember they had a three-bird flyover with some for some F-15s.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I need you to talk to some people and get the flyovers back. Can you make that happen?
That's Mike. That would be Michael Beal at UNCAA, head of marketing.
Oh man, that was one of the things that we were watching this back. This broadcast was unique in that it was only broadcast locally. So you had the WTVD video, and then you had Mick and Woody on the call, and just going back and being able to see that entrance, seeing you guys come out of the tunnel. Felder was talking about how he got a chance to mean mug for the camera when he was coming out, and he got to show that to his wife when they rewatched it, which is the most Felder thing ever. So one of the things that Mike shared with us earlier was a couple of kind of inside the huddle moments during that game, of just the things that were being said between you guys as combatants, and also the things that were kind of being relayed from the coaches and players to players. Do you remember any inside the huddle moments or maybe any post-game locker room stuff that still is etched in your memory from a game that had that kind of magnitude to it?
Yeah, I mean, I can't say it on your show because of the language, and my wife and my mom might watch this, and I don't want to disappoint them. But
fair enough.
It's one of those things. I mean, it's the typical things that you would hear on the playground, or in the locker room, or in the hallways at high school, or something like that. And it just was really. I mean, we were real. It just. I can't even explain it enough. I hate those dudes. I still don't like those guys. I have a coworker that I work with right now who unfortunately she went to NC State, but she's a Carolina girl through and through. And she happens to have gone to school with Tank Tyler at NC State. Mm. And they're mutual friends. They were in class together, blah, blah, blah. And she told me that the other day. And I literally told her, I said, good, tell her that you and I work together and tell him to go to hell. I mean, that's kind of my feelings, because I remember some of the things that he said to me out on the field, and I remember some things I said back to him. And so, suppose he's in the triangle. So
I'm just glad
he knows where to find me.
I'm glad that you've matured to the level that you are still speaking to this coworker as opposed to just cutting her out of your work life altogether.
Well, she's great. She's a Carolina girl too. So.
All right. Last thing I'll lob to you, and I'll let you get back to the dad life, especially in the time of quarantine.
That's right.
What was your reaction when Khalif Mitchell made the strip? We just had the big controversy of, some guy thinking TA was in and everybody else seeing he clearly wasn't. What was your reaction in Brian Chacos' mind when Khalif Mitchell stripped that ball and Crean Taylor came up with it?
I'll tell you what. I mean, I've had to block and do one-on-ones against Khalif Mitchell all training camp, one-on-one pass pro, one-on-one run blocking. So I know what kind of the beast that guy is to block against. And when he gets down in his goal line stance, I mean, he's damn near impossible to root out. So I'm thinking to myself, okay, I know they're basically on the half-yard line, and odds are pretty much they're going to get in. I mean, it's almost impossible not to get in unless someone misses a blocking assignment or a guy just falls to the ground or knee buckles or something, and that's exactly what happened, right? Guy comes off, hits Khalif. Hitting Khalif is like hitting a damn brick wall. Hits him, guy gets his knee buckled, slides off him. Khalif just comes out of nowhere. TA is obviously not ready to get hit by a 305-pound, defensive tackle. Ball pops up, game's over. We get it. So the funniest thing is from an alignment standpoint, it came out later in the week that Khalif was lined up in the wrong gap. If Khalif was lined up correctly, they would have walked right in the end zone. But Khalif was lined up in the wrong gap, which Khalif tended to sometimes do. I'm glad he ended up lining in the wrong gap for that game. But they would have walked right in the end zone. We didn't have the proper alignment. But thankfully, Khalif lined up incorrectly and secured the fumble for us and popped the ball out.
Shoulda, man. That's
woulda, coulda, shoulda. That's life, man.
Fate has a beautiful way of working out, and I appreciate you working it out on your schedule to join us here on the Throwback episode 7. Folks, that's going to do it. You've heard it from Chacos. You heard him give you some dirt. You've heard his real feelings about the Wolfpack and how much he does not care for their kind or their ilk.
No, not at all.
Not even in the slightest. That's gorgeous. A little family history on the wall there.
Little father-son action, Joey. That's how it runs deep, buddy.
That's legacy, man. Well, I want to say thanks to Brian Chacos. Special shout out to our sponsors, Johnny T-Shirt. Be sure to look them up at johnnytshirt.com. If you like this show today, be sure to go to either Apple, either iTunes or Google Play or wherever you're getting this broadcast and rate us. Give us a good review. If you don't like it, let me know. Let Buck know. Let Tommy Ashley know. Just give us a heads up because we want to make sure we're putting out good content for you guys. But for Mick Mixon, for Michael Felder, and for Czech Daddy Brian Chacos, I'm Joey Powell. Appreciate you guys listening to this episode of the Throwback. See, I'm so tongue-tied now. This episode of the Throwback, we'll be back with you sometime in the very near future here on Inside Carolina and InsideCarolina.com. Late.